Joining me now, live from Cairo, our man in the Middle East, Edward Yeranian. Edward, great to have you.
Thank you, John.
Wow, Edward, where do we start? Hey, the first thing I want to know about is this Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court confirmation fiasco. What are they saying about this in the Middle East? Like when you watch Sky News or you pick up the Cairo newspaper, I mean, how is this being reported back to other parts of the world?
Well, I think the BBC Arabic service is the one that's covering it the closest because they're broadcasting their English reporting into Arabic. And I think the BBC Arabic service, the BBC in general, seems to be aligned with the U.S. Democratic Party. So they've been giving a lot of play to the accusation as if it were, definitely a real, legitimate accusation. Personally, I have my doubts about it, much stronger than that. And the rest of the Arab media has been sort of sweeping it under the rug because the Sky News, Arabia, based in the United Arab Emirates, and Arabia TV in Saudi Arabia, they both support President Trump. So they are not playing up the fact that his nominee is in trouble. And the average person that I've discussed it with seems to think that American politics have become very dirty. So they're not surprised about what's going on. And that the sordid side of American life is, being focused on by the media. And there is really not a lot of love for the media these days among the Arab public. And I don't say that for any specific reason, just that they seem to have the same sense that we do, that the media no longer just gives us facts and information.
Well, because it's fake news, Edward. That's why we have fake news. That's kind of the way you summed it up there. Okay, let's get... It's called U.S. fake news. Now, Edward, let's get to the UN last week. I was there, as you know, all week. I love going to that UN week because it's a lot of fun if you can, but you have to walk a lot because you can't take a cab anywhere because all the streets are closed and you can't get from A to B, so you have to take subway or cab. So I was there all week, and I was at the president's press conference on Wednesday in New York, and he leaked out that his grand plan for the Israeli-Palestine situation is a two-state solution. Now, here's what's interesting to me, and I want to get your take on it. So here's a U.S. president, really the first one ever, boldly endorsing a two-state solution. Basically what he said is, I believe in America first. I believe in sovereignty of my country. Therefore, I have to believe that the Palestinians need sovereignty of their own country and they need self-rule. So I think they should have their own state. This is a U.S. president saying this. So you would think that President Abbas of Palestine would say, okay, well, this is at least a start. This is a good thing. We want our own state. So let's see if we can negotiate this and go from there. Instead, he gets up on the UN, trashes the president, blasts Trump, and says he's not going to negotiate and he doesn't want anything to do with the U.S. involvement. I don't get that, right? I mean, why wouldn't he want to find a way to get their own state? And what Trump said was interesting. He said, look, I'm a real estate guy. This is all about real estate, right? Who gets what land? Who gets what incentives? Who gets what economic investment? We just got to get all this worked out, and then they can have their own state, and we can live happily ever after. The other thing he said is you can't have peace in the Middle East without peace between Israel and Palestine. Now, that's my intro. What's your analysis of the whole thing?
Well, I think the problem is that President Abbas is not on good terms with Hamas in Gaza, and anything he agrees to, they will not agree to just because, as a matter of principle, not even principle, as a matter of keeping their conflict going. And you've got states which are backing both men. The Egyptians are fairly solidly behind Abbas, which is not to say they're supporting his position in the UN, but the Qataris and the Iranians are supporting Hamas. And anything that one side agrees to, the other side will dispute, just as a matter of principle. So no matter what it is. And I think that Abbas's card that he had, that he wanted to play at the UN, taking the U.S. To the International Court of Justice, I think that was something he had. He's been holding on to a card for a very long time. I've heard mention of it before. And he just seems to think that that's going to play to his audience, play to world opinion. And that's all he's doing, playing to people's opinion, local opinion and world opinion, because at this point he couldn't deliver a peace agreement, even if he wanted to, because he would have Hamas on his back. So I think that's what the issue is. And President Trump, with all the good intentions of the world, no matter how good those intentions, I don't think he could get those two sides to reconcile. The Egyptians have tried repeatedly to get Hamas and Abbas, the Fatah movement, to reconcile, and they haven't, mostly, I think, because you've got these outside countries that are pushing and pulling in different directions. And Qatar seems to bankroll Hamas, and the Iranians don't have a lot of money to bankroll them, but they've trained them. They've sent Hezbollah to train them. They've given them arms surreptitiously through Hezbollah, and I think they want to keep that conflict going. And Iran has said repeatedly that they think Israel is an illegitimate state, so they believe it has no right to any territory anywhere. So so long as they repeat that position, you're not going to get anywhere.
So let me ask you this, Edward. Hamas, why would Hamas not be in favor of some sort of a two-state solution to give the Palestinian people their own nation? Why would they be in opposition to that? What's the alternative? Just perpetual war?
I think there are many radical, militant Islamists. The Hamas people are the Muslim Brotherhood, and they ultimately believe that they're going to vanquish Israel anyway. But what they're aiming for right now is to have their own little independent enclave in Gaza. And they were going to sign a deal with Israel for a long-term truce agreement, which I think suits Israel, because they don't really want to see, Israel doesn't really apparently want to see a two-state solution anyway. So they would be happy to see Gazastan and West Bankistan and have those two sides not reconcile. But Gaza, the Hamas people found that Egypt was pushing them to come to some sort of an agreement with President Abbas, and then they just stuck their foot down, and that sort of squashed the long-term truce deal with Israel. So I think they're willing to have a long-term truce deal with Israel, but just not to have a two-state solution.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that the president's grand plan here to bring peace to this region, which they've not unveiled, other than we know that it involves two states because they leaked that. What you're saying is that, in your estimation, your analysis, the Jared Kushner plan is going nowhere, whatever that might be.
I don't want to be that pessimistic. I mean, it looks that way, but I mean, you know, the Middle East is very unpredictable. Anything could change in a matter of moments. I think what we've seen over the years is the change on the ground has mostly been the result of conflict. And I shudder to think that that's going to happen again, but it could very well, because the Middle East is a tinderbox and could go up at any minute in any particular place. The Hamas people keep organizing their protests on Friday, and they keep playing to Arab news stations that their people are getting killed after they march them into harm's way. And the Israelis are not budging an inch on this two-state solution. So I don't think either side is willing to make the necessary moves towards a peace deal. And as I said, once again, we could see a conflict that would set the whole place up, a conflict that could ultimately have results on the ground.
Well, the only hope here is that I think what the president has done in moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the U.S. embassy, is he gave Israel the biggest chip they wanted right at the outset. And he got that done. And, of course, President Abbas was saying at the UN in his speech that based on that, he doesn't want the U.S. involved. He can't trust them. He doesn't have their best interest. He said they're 100% aligned with Israel, so why would I negotiate with them? But the other side of this coin is that the president now is in a position where he can ask the Israeli government for a number of key concessions because he's already given them the one big thing they wanted, right? So I think that's what the strategy is. Now, whether or not, Edward, this is going to play out, I have no idea. But it's a plan, right? I mean, at least it's a plan, and we'll see what happens. But I think your analysis is spot on. President Abbas he's really in a lose-lose situation because Hamas is not going to sign off on anything he does. So then the other question becomes, are you better off getting the facilitator in there just negotiating with Hamas? Are you better off with that?
Well, I think that they are a lot closer to an agreement with Hamas than they are with Abbas. Mm-hmm. And Abbas is in a bad position internally with respect to his own party. And if he made concessions, his own party could topple him. He's an old man. I think he's 83 now, 84, getting close to 84. He's had heart problems. And I think with all the pressure the Egyptians had put on him, I think he would have come up with a deal if he could have. So I think logistically, with respect to his own party, he's not able to come up with a deal, never mind with Hamas. So you've got a lot of players here that are unstable. I don't want to analyze the Israeli situation because every time you turn, there are people who are trying to pull down Prime Minister Netanyahu as well. And you remember, of course, Prime Minister Rabin, who was shot. So ultimately, if he were to make a deal and they were to agree on it, God only knows if there would be someone out there to shoot him as well. So there's so many fudge factors in this kind of a situation that it's difficult to see how you could move it forward. But President Trump has the merit of trying new things every time you look at him. So, I mean, I give him credit for that. And who knows? He might think of a new plan.
Well, look, at least he's trying. We're trying to do something. So I really do, though, like the fact that the president leaked he was going towards a two-state solution, because many of us that really want to see this solved, that don't have some of the biases that go with either side, you really can't see this ever getting solved without each country having their own state. I mean, you just can't see it. And I thought the president was spot on when he says the Palestinian people have a right to self-rule. They certainly shouldn't be, under the thumb of the Israelis. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Edward, I only got a couple more minutes. I want to get very quickly to the Turkish situation. Where do the Turks play now in this whole thing? But define Turkish foreign policy right now as it relates to the Gulf and Syria and Idlib. Where are they?
Well, Turkey is divided because their main trading partners are Iran, and Iran is in trouble. So they need to, they need to find new outlets. The Qataris, their other main ally. President Erdogan, he's an Islamist. He's a Muslim Brotherhood guy, and he's in a bind because he needs to come to an agreement with the Russians, despite the fact that they're opposed to his positions in Syria and with respect to the Islamic world in general. He's had to toe the line and cut deals with President Putin, and that's what they've sort of done in Idlib in the north of Syria. So he's straddling a line with everybody. He's making compromises while at the same time putting out harsh rhetoric. So I think under the surface, he's trying to come to terms with both the U.S., because they keep saying that they're going to be, patrolling the north of Syria together. It hasn't happened. I suspect it may not happen, but I think they're trying to repair those bridges. They've tried to repair bridges with Israel, despite the fact that they're on bad terms and they've been opposed to each other on a lot of different issues. So I think he's in trouble economically with his currency, in trouble with his trade with Iran, and a lot of people want to put in gas and oil pipelines, and so he's sort of trying to cut deals here and there to keep the ship afloat.
All right, we'll see what plays out. Eddie Yeranian live from Cairo, our JF correspondent in the Middle East, been with us for 9 years. Can you imagine that, Edward? 9 years. John Fredericks Radio Network.